If you're not getting the opportunities that you want or you hope for, you have to ask yourself, are you showing up? And then when those opportunities present themselves to you, are you saying yes?
All right, hello everyone. Welcome to the show. Grab the most yellow thing near you, pull up a seat. It's time to get to know someone a whole lot better. This is the What You Don't Hear podcast. This is a life podcast. It's a story podcast. It's a bit of an open journal dive into people's lives as I sit and uncover the real story behind my guest's journey, finding out what makes them who they are and digging into the parts of their story that we otherwise wouldn't normally get to hear. I am your host. My name is Ross Tyson. I'm a creative director. I often dabble as a filmmaker. I'm a doer and maker of many, many things, a freelancer of all kinds, to be honest. But of course, in this case, most importantly, I'm a podcaster and someone who just really, really enjoys talking to people. So as always, I've got a great episode for you this week as I sit down with Johnny Riddle, who is the executive director of the Franklinton Arts District. It is seriously a great conversation. But as you know, first, as of late, before we dive into the conversations, I've got some cool things to tell you about because there's some people helping me keep the lights on for this show. And guys, guess what? I have not one, but two sponsors for this week's episode. So first, speaking of Franklinton, this episode is brought to you in part by Makers Social, a place that is located right here in the Franklinton Arts District. Now, if you're a longtime listener of the show, this might sound a little familiar because my friend and past guest here on the pod, Megan Pondo, actually runs this place, and it's seriously such a cool concept. So, what is it? Well, Maker Social is a DIY project bar where you can get your hands messy with some fun projects like woodworking, jewelry making, or even making your own real leather wallets. They also host private events such as team building corporate events and even birthdays. Now, what's also interesting is they also have a full bar with cocktails, local beers, and a very rare bourbon list for you bourbon collectors out there. So, honestly, what's more fun than getting your craft on with some friends while maybe even getting your drink on as well for a night out? So, you can make a reservation on their website, and if you do, right now you can type in the code WYDH into the notes section when you make the reservation to get $10 off your project's booking. So, head to makerscolumbus.com if you want to go check it out. But I mean, like, for real, if you've never been, you should go. Grab some friends, go make some fun projects with them. Or, I don't know, honestly, at a bare minimum, just like book some time to go in or just walk in or something. Just go to meet Megan because she's super cool and has made a very, very cool place in Maker Social. And I'm also sure that everybody else that works there are very awesome people as well. So once more, to book a reservation, go to makerscolumbus.com, enter WYDH in the notes of your checkout for $10 off. And just support some fun local things going down here in Franklinton. Now, also speaking of more fun things that are happening here in Columbus in general, I've got some more stuff that you can go and do and go experience because it's time for me to tell you about the other sponsor for this week's episode, and that is PromoWest Productions. And guess what? You know how this has been going lately. I've got some more cool shows that you can go check out because these ones are all going down at Newport Music Hall, brought to you by PromoWest. So on August 2nd, they've got Muna coming to town, and there's a good chance you might see me at that show. Very good chance that I will be there. They've also got The Regrets on August 4th, Trevor Hall on August 7th, and Jungle on September 11th. Again, those are all happening at the Newport Music Hall. So to purchase tickets, you can visit axs.com, or as always, for more info, you can visit promowestlive.com. Folks, the shows just keep stacking up, so if you want to know more, if you want to go to any of these at Newport Music Hall, or if you want to find out about any of the other upcoming shows, once again, grab your tickets at axs.com or visit promowestlive.com for more info in general. Okay, so this week's episode, like I said, it's a fun one with guest Johnny Riddle. So I've mentioned it already. He's the executive director of the Franklinton Arts District, and man, am I stoked to have him on the show. You'll hear us mention it a bit, but when we originally met up a couple months ago just to chat, we really hit it off, had an awesome conversation there, but I had no idea just how much more awesome the conversation could get, and that happens here on the show. Johnny really opens up and shares his story, his thoughts on the Arts District, his goals with it, the potential he sees in all of Columbus, why he just loves helping and connecting people, and of course, so much more. You know what this show's made of. You know how it goes at this point. We dive into tons of stuff, so let's just get to it. I've talked enough at the opening here, so I'm sure you're more than ready to hear someone else talk for a little bit. Although I'm still going to be talking because I'm talking to them too in the conversation. So you still gotta listen to me talk more. Anyway, here it is. Let's do it. Episode 62 of What You Don't Hear. But yeah, dude, I'm so stoked for getting to do this. Man.
Absolutely.
I seriously appreciate it. And what's funny is you and I, it's funny because I have so many people on this show that I meet for the very first time. Mm-hmm. And so we have that deep dive of conversation. But what's funny is I feel like you and I almost had like a teaser example
Absolutely.
of a podcast conversation the first time you and I sat down. Because we talked for what?
It was well
at least 2
over
hours,
yeah.
right?
It was well over what was allotted for that meeting.
100%. Yeah. Because you came over here and it was just like, all right, cool, yeah, let's actually meet and let's just chat a little bit. And then we ended up just diving into all these different stories. And pretty much I was like, I should for sure just have him on the podcast and then make the whole purpose of our conversation.
Yeah.
All of those stories. So again, I appreciate you being down to be on the show. I'm stoked to do this. I'm stoked to rehash some of that conversation.
Absolutely. I'm really excited to be here. Our first meeting it felt so natural. The conversation just flowed so well. And I think that we had a lot of shared experiences as we were kind of navigating our desire to create and to make a difference. Yeah, which is, so that honestly just kind of opens the floodgates of kind of what I want to dive into with you at first, is that even just rehashing it for me, and obviously anybody listening or watching this, what all do you do? Because I know in that conversation we talked about a bunch of different things, speaking of those creative endeavors and all the things that we want to build, and how even certain ways that maybe we are going to be able to work together, and all the sort of cool things that not only happen here at 400 but here in Franklinton in general. And I feel like even though we had that chat, there's still a lot of things that I feel like I don't truly know what all you do. So if you were to lay it out for even me or anybody listening, what's the full spread? What all do you do? Who are you and what do you do? Okay, so first and foremost, the basic layout, what I would put on my LinkedIn is that as executive director of the Franklinton Arts District, I serve as an advocate, collaborator, connector, and resource to the artists and arts organizations here in the Franklinton Arts District. So as the actual first ever executive director, that is incredibly vague, and I'm building that as I go. Up until the time I came on board in this role, everything was done by a volunteer board of trustees. So Franklinton Fridays music series by volunteers, our after school arts education program by volunteers. So there was a lot of flexibility in kind of defining my role. And with the Franklinton Arts District as an organization and a destination, we kind of work in two different capacities. So as the organization, we're looking to create educational programming. We have a mural mentorship program that we work with Columbus City Schools to help them, make an impact on their community, find pride by making public art. And we look to make grants through our George Bellows grant program, through a lot of fundraising, our recent art auction, Art for Franklinton. So there is a lot of that resource component where we're trying to build the artist's ability to create, not only with resources that are tangible like money, but also with a skill set to kind of grow the next generation of Columbus artists and muralists. So there's a lot of that aspect for the organization of the Franklinton Arts District. But as a destination, there's also all these district partners who are doing really rad stuff themselves, but they're all individual voices. And for me, in my role and to the organization, we're a unifying voice. One that is, we can amplify louder, have a wider audience that we can reach combined, but also we're at tables that maybe individual artists or the organizations aren't always invited to. And that allows us to make sure that we are maintaining that integrity, that authenticity of the Franklinton Arts District as we continue to grow. You know, the growth is inevitable. We can never slow that down. And as a nonprofit arts organization, we have only so much that we can do. But the one thing that we can do is we can advocate for those who created this culture, that developers, businesses are looking to invest in. So, I mean, that's kind of a broad answer, but
yeah, but I love it. I love it. Honestly, we can just cap it there because that was just a perfect explanation. It's like, I don't know how we top that great explanation of everything. Well, that's like, what's so fun about hearing all that is, I think you and I talked about this when we sat down a few months ago, is like, I love getting to meet somebody like you who is not only involving themselves in the arts community, but understands your why and your how you're doing it, and how you can amplify those voices, and how you can, you know, just do all the things that you guys are trying to do. Because I think we talked about this, like, I have always felt like I was always in my own bubble.
Yes.
When it came to the creative world. And, you know, I'm someone who dabbles in a handful of different avenues. It's not just being a video director or just a graphic design artist or just a photographer, like whatever, you know, or just a podcaster, right? It's like, I love to have that multifaceted approach because for no other reason other than I just love doing a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
That is really it. And even though I've or maybe because of, I don't know, even though I love doing all of those things, I don't know if it's almost made me never niche down and find that singular community, or if it, you know, or if it was because, oh, well, you're trying to kind of include yourself in 100 different communities, and sometimes that's just difficult to do. So it's always interesting to have conversations with someone like yourself who understands not only the value in those communities, but how those communities are built. Because I think that was a lot of questions that I asked you, even out of curiosity, of like, well, what does it mean to curate an arts community or to help build one or facilitate things for one? Because again, I feel like I've always been kind of floating in my solo bubble. Not to say that I haven't had, you know, partners or you know, teammates or whatever along the way. Like, yes, there's been help, but I've always felt just on like the outside of every community. You know, it's like I dip my toe in, and I'm like, oh, cool, I made some good connections and good friends, and I don't really know how to stick around. I'm just going to keep kind of doing my thing, and then it'll circle back around at some point.
Well, something similar, Lee, that I identify with myself in you is I think that you see an aspect that you want to get into that is adjacent to a project or something that you are working on, and maybe instead of finding somebody who does that, you are interested in learning how to do it yourself. So you then learn what that graphic design, or you know, how to do a podcast, or you know, lighting, audio, and you know, sometimes that is self-siloing. I do it myself. In this role and in past roles, I find myself, instead of troubling somebody to do this aspect of this project, I'll learn how to do graphic design. And then I know how to do it in the future, but that can, be self-siloing.
Yeah, 100%. And I am 1,000,000% guilty of that exact thing, where I'm always like, man, I'd love to team up with somebody on this or somebody on that. And then I think sometimes even the selfishness of a creative venture peeks through to where my focus is, well, I really want it this way, and I don't know if I can communicate or align with somebody the right way, and then I'm troubling them, and I don't want to aggravate them in their creative process. So just like you said, I guess I'll just tackle it myself, because I've gathered all this creative tool belt of all these different aspects that I can create from. So I do just kind of dive in like, I'll just design the thing myself, or I'll just figure out how to film it myself. And I don't really know about audio engineering, so that's one problem area that I'm always like, I need somebody to make a score or a song for this. But you're 100% right. And I've never heard the phrasing self-siloing before. That's interesting. And it makes a lot of sense.
It does, and it's hard to get out of. Especially when you start to get those achievements that really make it worthwhile. I mean, just in any venture, when you're trying to achieve that next level or gain that new skill, and you're like, oh, I got it. Look what I was able to do. Now I want to do it better. And sometimes you just get then so internally focused on your own growth that it does isolate you from the community that you are a part of, and you don't even know it.
Yes. Well, that was, it's funny you say that, and I feel like this is a decent segue into I feel like you literally just reaching out and chatting with me that day made me realize I was a part of a community that I didn't know I was. Exactly what you just said, because in my mind, again, I've built this bubble, the silo, right? I've built this bubble and I've created it and worked in it for so long, and whoever kind of enters the bubble, it's like, all right, cool, this is great, but I never exactly know how to poke out of that. Now, because of that, even coming to a place like 400 West, and I've been here, not in this room, but in the building in general, over a year officially now. And even though I was here and I've been creating here and this podcast has been happening here for that long, in my mind, it never really processed, oh, you are a creative member of this community now. I was just like, I'm a dude who does some things and I needed to rent a space to do so. And it's easy to, again, your viewpoints kind of almost being just a reflection of everything in that bubble, where it's hard to almost see through that thing. And truly, you reaching out and wanting to meet up and chat made me take those blinders off a little bit. It really, truly did. So I appreciate you doing that and just having that fun conversation. And, even it was just to get to know each other. And like you said, you're like, I like to get to know people here in the community and all that sort of stuff. But even, as silly and as minuscule as this is, even when you, like the Franklinton Arts page and all that sort of stuff on social, started sharing stuff from the podcast, I was like, whoa, what is this? Where's this support coming from? That's so cool. And again, not thinking, oh, it's because this is being created now within that community, and people support things that are created within their community. And so it was strange to me, and it's strange to even say that out loud, but it was kind of a take the blinders off moment. In just our chat and you reaching out in general.
It's one of those things that I really identified that there were a lot of artists who may identify with 400 West Ridge. But a larger community, I wanted them to say, I'm a Franklinton Arts District creative. I want that badge of honor when they are, putting their, artistic endeavor out there into the world. I want them to know that they have this breadth of support behind them, and that it's not just going to be just a sharing of a post, but it's going to be those connectors. I love doing that. I love identifying something that somebody is doing, whether it is a need or just an opportunity for growth, and saying, you need to talk to that person. You need to talk to that person. Combined, we can make the type of art, events, community that we not only just want to be a part of, but others see it and they want to be a part of it too. And then we welcome them in. And then we're stronger with every additional member that we have in this community. It's something that I started when I first got this role last year in February, and now I'm trying to continue it. I send out an email to all of the managers and gallerists and everyone who's running the spaces to have quarterly meetings where it is just let's grab coffee. I just want to, this isn't out of a need for anything other than I want to have a strong connection with you, and I want to amplify what you're doing, and how can we then build connections for the future.
So was that something, like, was that a place or an energy that you always worked from, even before you were in this position? Like, have you always been that kind of like community driven, like, oh my gosh, I like bringing people together, or just being involved in the creative world in general? Like, has that kind of always been there, and this is the thing that's really letting you fly? Or have you been kind of in roles like that and it's kind of solidified in this one, at least for the current time being? Like,
yeah. I mean, that's a really good question. I think that I have, I've always seemed to fall into leadership roles, whether, going back to high school in marching band. I was band president, not a brag, just
I'll put that in the title of the show.
Yeah. But it's something where I love to rally people around a common goal. And once I got out of college, and this kind of really is, transitions into a story of how I got here. Because it wasn't a straight journey. It wasn't, I went for arts administration, 1, 2, 3, here I am now running an arts organization. It was out of kind of a journeyman career in multiple facets and different areas. I graduated 2009 and with a degree in psychology and political science. My goal was to go to law school. And, that was right when the recession was hitting. And I was talking to people who were getting their JDs or just recently got their JDs, Juris Doctorate, and said, I can't find a job. I'm actually taking it off my resume because I'm too qualified or overqualified for jobs that I'm looking for. So I fell into a marketing role, and I worked for an agency for a little over 7 years, and I had one client. And it was a client that eventually I realized I didn't align morally with what they were selling. But, in your 20s, especially with a paycheck coming in every 2 weeks, I was able to be morally flexible. It was something that I was like, well, this is paying the bills. I'm able to actually feel like I'm in a stable place. And that was a big thing going into college that was very much emphasized from my mom, because my mom didn't go to college, my stepdad didn't go to college, my dad didn't go to college. So I was the first opportunity to really make it worthwhile. So I fell in with this marketing agency and worked there for 7.5 years. And I was coming up on my 30s. And I recognized that there was something missing. As cliche as it sounds, I was laying in bed awake at night, not being able to fall asleep, wondering, what am I doing with my life? How am I benefiting anybody? And that's when I decided that I wanted to get involved in the creative community. I had been, in bands in my 20s. I was playing shows. I was going to gallery openings with my artist friends. So it was something that I was always around. Sometimes I wasn't fully involved in it, but it was a community that I really wanted to be a part of. But I'm not a visual artist, and I'm not the best musician. I will be the first to admit that. I love playing, and I still play and write on my own, but I recognize this is an opportunity for me to be involved. So I volunteered with Wild Goose Creative, who is now here in the Franklinton Arts District, but this is up when they were on Summit in Sohut. And in college, I was doing some fundraising for Ohio State. And it was just like a college job, call alumni, ask them for money. And, I was fairly decent at it. And I was like, well, I can take those skills. I can take the marketing ability that I have, and now let's put it towards something that actually benefits artists, the community, everyone that, is adjacent to it. So I did that for a few months, and once that specific event was over, I wanted more. I saw these connections. I was talking to creative people. I was talking to interesting people, and I wanted to be a part of that all the time. So I then got connected with 934 Gallery over in Milo Grogan on Cleveland Avenue, and they were putting together their 934 Fest, which is in every September. So, there's art, there's music, there's food, it's a great festival, and I'm really excited about where they're going. But I was like, okay, well, I did this for another organization. Let's try it here. Let's try to do sponsorships for this festival. The festival came and went, and then I just stayed. I kept on showing up. Every opening, I started to just volunteer for patching and painting walls, because I saw this like grassroots arts organization. Like, everybody there is still a volunteer, but they have this brick and mortar where they're showing cutting edge exhibitions. People are just showing up, and I just kept on showing up, and I ended up doing that for 5.5 years. And through that, I eventually became their volunteer executive director. Did that for about 1.5 years. And a number of these opportunities led career-wise to a couple other jobs that I had, from the marketing into some development jobs and eventually into this. But that's kind of really where I gained my understanding of how you can connect the arts and the arts community with the neighborhood that you're a part of. Because at 934, they're an island. Them with Milo Arts, which is the artist community in an old school building over there, there's no other arts around there. So if people are coming to your exhibition, you have to be on point. You have to give them something to travel over there to. But also keeping in mind the historic residents of that neighborhood, and building that bridge. So eventually now it'd be 2 years ago, they opened up the applications for this role here in Franklinton Arts District, and luckily I had worked with the board and FAD previously at 934 and through some other projects, and I saw, first off, the ability to do what I love and I was doing as a volunteer, and now actually do it as a job, be paid for it, which I think is, anything that we are passionate about, anything that we take pride in, having that opportunity is something that you build up towards. That's where volunteering, that's where so many people get involved in volunteering, because they care about the field, the mission, all these things. And it's to build into something bigger. And that's where I was very, very fortunate to be offered this role and bring a lot of the ideas and things that I focused on at 934 to a larger scale. No longer was it just one arts organization connecting with the community. I'm now have the ability to help represent all these organizations, these artists, represent them to the neighborhood of Franklinton, connecting with those who live on the west side of 315, and showcase what the Franklinton Arts District can be to all of Central Ohio. I want those throughout all of Columbus to look at Franklinton and be like, that is a creative haven where if I want to get involved in the arts, that's where I go. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think, we have something very, very special over here. Because it's not just an arts district where you're going to see some commercial galleries that you'll never get represented by, and you're seeing art that doesn't make you think, doesn't really speak to you. And then you're walking away and you're not able to harness that excitement that you may get. Here, you're pulling back the curtain. You're able to see the artists as they make. Here in 400, at Glass Axis, at so many spaces, you're getting to see the process from the creation to the exhibition. And then if you are inspired to create, you have that ability to do it here. And that's so cool.
Yeah. What I love about that is it's almost like the idea of there's a difference between what you did and what you experienced.
Yes.
I think you can go do something. You can go to a commercial arts gallery or a show of any kind, an event of any kind. You can go do that.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between going and doing that and going and experiencing that and feeling something. And it doesn't have to be a life-changing something, but going and feeling it and enjoying yourself and taking in your surroundings or the people there or the culture that it's creating in general. And it feels like that's a lot of, at least in my mind, so much of what you explained is like breaking it down to that difference of just going and doing something, being around some stuff, but really trying to more build it and form it into, no, this is a place, an area, just an environment that you can experience rather than just walk through and say that you went to a cool gallery one day.
Yep.
Or whatever it may be.
There's a difference between the focus on consumers and the focus on community. Here, you're coming to Franklinton Fridays and you're getting to meet the artists. You're hanging out behind the Vanderelli room. You're having a beer with AJ and those who are exhibiting inside the building. It's something that, I'm very, very lucky that I get to experience. And I want to, expose people to that. To maybe when they hear Franklinton, they are not 100% sure about what that means, because there have been some hurdles, and there are things that we as a neighborhood need to grow and work on, but we are just such a strong neighborhood and a strong district. So I really want to just open people's eyes to what's happening here in Franklinton.
Yeah, well, I mean, and again, I as someone who is now, we've become friends, we now know each other, all this sort of stuff, that doesn't happen unless you reach out and make the connection. Mm-hmm. Because, I wouldn't have thought or known to say, oh, I'm going to message the page on social and, hey, I'd love to meet the executive director. Whoever, and it says something that you're in that role, but your goal, amongst the plethora of things that I'm sure you've got on your plate, from a business standpoint or whatever it may be all the time, but you're using that role to reach out to people like me and saying, let's just get to know it. Let's just meet. I just want to meet. I just want to chat.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm speaking out of place here because I don't know for sure, but I would wander to guess that I don't think there's a lot of places where the executive anything or anyone who's in charge of something is making a ton of effort to get to know their community members. You know what I mean? So it's like you're already placing that foot of value forward by doing simple things like that. Again, even in the smallest way, you made me realize I was now a part of a community. Whether I'm here every day or I'm meeting everybody here or not, the door is open.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, because we even talked about like the Franklinton Fridays thing, where I'm like, yeah, if I'm not going with a friend, like I have no idea what. Like it's intimidating because I just don't know where to go, even though I have a space in the building. Like I'm just like, oh my god, there's so many things to experience. But it's like, again, breaking through that bubble basically. Mm-hmm. And so again, it's like somebody like you in a role like this, it brings tremendous value, and I can see as a kind of an outsider to your experience or your work or whatever it is up to this point, like I'm already seeing the value. You know what I mean? I can already see like, cool, man, like the things that you're saying you want to do, I have already experienced. Yeah. And again, I can't speak for a broad scope of everything that you've been a part of or what's going on around here or anything. But again, even in a small, minuscule example, I can sit and say, I don't know. There's no other place that I can think that I would go and you know, again, the one of the leaders, quote unquote, of anything in that community. I can't say that like when necessarily I'm going to meet them or chat with them, you know, and more so that they're going to make the effort to do that, you know, because it's not just like, oh yeah, I lead this board and I focus on the business things, the sponsorships, the money, the events, because I guarantee that takes a lot of time and energy on its own. But the fact that, again, not to harp on this so much, but I just want to, quote unquote, give you your flowers on things like this, because I'm sure you've done it with so many other people. Like, you took 2 hours out of your day to come meet a random dude in his new studio, and it wasn't just because, oh, you're at 400 West, cool, let's connect. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We could have sat for 30 minutes, you could have been like, all right, dude, I gotta go. Yeah. But we talked about random stuff for 2 hours, you know, and now we're gonna do it again for a podcast.
Well, I see, and I think that the organization, and this is why, you know, when I was interviewing for the role, I think that we synced up so well, is I see a value in every community member who is here. I mean, hopefully even sometimes when they may not see the value that they're bringing to the area or the community just yet.
Yeah, which totally happens.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
But when I was really kind of surprised, because I didn't know that this podcast was being made here. I had seen the podcast on Instagram, and then I think it was you posted the new studio here in 400, and I made the connection. And I was like, oh, this is so good. I can't believe that I didn't know that it was here in the Franklinton Arts District already. And I think it was the same day you posted that I reached out.
Yeah,
because
that's awesome.
I love podcasts myself. I listen to them endlessly. And I was really excited that a different art form is happening here. I mean, we are the Franklinton Arts District. There's an S there. And it's something that I want to highlight. I want to highlight the fact that there are podcasts made here. There are comedians, there's musicians, there's so many other creatives outside just visual arts here, but people don't know that. And that's where I can, first off, connect with them, see how we can amplify that. Because, again, a lot of the focus is on the visual arts. And while, I absolutely love and value them, there are so many creatives. And there's people who are doing what you do, where it's a variety of different creative endeavors. Like, look at Larry Robertson. He's a DJ.
Been on the show.
Absolutely. He's a DJ. He's a gallerist now with Wit Gallery. He is an artist himself. He does so many things. Yeah. But, people may not know about the B and the C and the D and the E because they may know him from one thing, or they may know you for one thing. But we're all so diverse, and we have so many unique skill sets and passions, but you just don't know it yet.
Yeah. And I love, again, when people take that notion to try and help someone uncover what they may not know about themselves. Because that, and we might have talked about this the last time, but like that's something I feel like you and I connect on a lot, is that I'm very similar in a lot of those ways. Like I'm that person who, like, it's almost dangerous for someone to tell me an idea that they have because I'm immediately going to cycle through, like, okay, is there anybody I know that I can connect you with?
Yep.
And then I'm cycling through, like, okay, what are all the ways, even though I don't know the answers, I'm still going to immediately try and problem solve and be like, okay, what are the things you could do to get started? Is there anything I could help you with? Do you need a logo for that brand? Okay, cool. Maybe I can mock you up some logos a little bit. And okay, cool. Maybe we can take these photos for this thing, or, oh, here's the steps that you could take to get started in a couple weeks. And it doesn't mean you have to do it overnight and have the business up and running tomorrow, but here's how we can start getting the ball rolling, right? Let's start start building that snowball that maybe starts going down a hill. And I think sometimes I feel like that I can be very overbearing in that, because I try to tame myself and not getting super hyped about it. But I also, like, I find that in between of, like, I'm not trying to be super hype and like, oh my God, you could do everything. But also not being like, hey, yeah, if you don't put the work in, it's not going to work. Like, finding that good, like, balance in between. And it's always, like, I always enjoy finding anybody else who loves being that connector of sorts, whether it's connecting to other things or helping somebody connect the dots within themselves.
Yep.
I love meeting other people like that, because that is so much how my brain works. And sometimes I feel like I'm insane for it, because I'm like, why do I think like this?
Not at all.
You know what I mean?
So, remind me, you're not from Columbus.
No, I'm originally from like an hour and a half southeast of here, a very small town called Crooksville, Ohio. Yes.
Okay.
No crooks were there. I mean, I don't know how, many crooks might be. But,
Well, that seems to be very much, I will say in a broad sense, a very Columbus mentality. It's one thing that I absolutely love about this city. It's very much a Franklinton mentality, because every single time that I throw out a wild idea, or people throw out wild ideas to me, the first answer for me is yes. Now, how do we do it?
Yep.
It's not like, okay, please break down everything about this. Maybe let's come back, let's talk. No, it's like, let's do this. Now, how do we do it?
Yeah.
And I love that about this district. I love it about the city, because for us to grow both individually and as a city and a district, we have to say yes to things that aren't always easy to say yes to. I think that for me was the biggest realization when I was trying to be involved and get into a community that I wasn't in previously, is first off saying yes to opportunities. Well, before, you have to show up. Show up, and then show up and keep showing up. If you're not getting the opportunities that you want or you hope for, you have to ask yourself, are you showing up? And then when those opportunities present themselves to you, are you saying yes? And around the time when I was getting involved at 934, I was working with a volunteer who, just really, kind of blew my mind with the amount of stuff that they were doing. And I was like, how do you get all these, how are you involved in all these things? And she's like, I say yes. And I was like, wow, okay. I'm going to say yes to every opportunity, within reason. I'm going to say yes to every opportunity, because I'm never going to grow. I'm never going to get these unless I say yes.
Yeah, and see, like that, I feel like, one, in general, the saying yes to more things is something that I have worked on a lot in the last few years, of things from an outward experience.
Yeah.
But as far as internal, that is why I do so many things. It's exactly what you said, is like, I'm saying yes to myself.
Yep.
So often. And I think that's where a lot of people stop themselves immediately. And again, like you said, within reason. I'm not going to sit and be like, I had an idea to start up the next Google tomorrow. Yeah. Yes, I should.
Yes.
Like, okay, that's a huge undertaking, right? But in general, like if I have an idea for a podcast or a photo shoot that I want to do or a short film I want to make or a brand I want to try and find some, whatever it is, I kind of don't have those filters of like, should you, I don't know. Like, it's kind of like that immediate, yes, why would I tell myself no?
Yeah.
But then the filters are going to come up of logic of like, okay, but how? And then what do we do? But it's exactly like you said, yes. And then now let's solve the problem.
Yeah.
We've already said yes, and effectively, in almost a fun way, created an issue because we've said yes, and now we have to figure it out, right? We've created our own problem to then effectively solve, but that's a part of it because it's not going to happen if you're not working to solve that problem. Something else that you said in a lot of that, and even a little bit ago, is like, I love that you shared the idea of showing up. And then after you're showing up when those opportunities present themselves, being able to say yes to those opportunities, because there's honestly been people on this show before who have said very, very similar things. And I think that's so important for people to hear, and myself included, is like, you don't always feel like showing up to certain things.
Oh, absolutely.
It's easy to not feel like, whether that's physically, whether that's sending an email, whatever it is, whatever form of quote unquote showing up might be in that case, it's hard to show up. But in your, path, at least to now, that's something that you did. You made sure to show up and effectively created those opportunities that were then presented to you at a later date.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big thing that's easy for a lot of people to overlook, is you forget that you can actually be the catalyst for that later opportunity that comes your way.
Yeah.
Like I've always loved the quote of "make your own luck." And, that's an easy thing to throw on a t-shirt and make it all hypey and fun and stuff like that. But, once you hear it explained, it makes a lot of sense. And that's always so much of what I've tried to work off of and remind myself of when I'm looking at somebody else and saying, they're so lucky they got to do that. Yeah. Well, sometimes can luck have something to do with it? Yeah. Absolutely. Right place, right time. But even still reverse engineering that, why were they at the right place?
Exactly.
At the right time?
Yep.
So no matter what way you break it down or what way you kind of want to try and twist it, in some way, whether it's annoying or not, they effectively kind of made their own luck. And that's already so much of what I'm hearing from your story, is someone could look at you and be like, oh, he's the executive director of Franklinton Arts District. That's what luck he has. And it's like, well, you created that own luck because you created those opportunities. You created that domino effect of one thing that led to another, that you kept saying yes to. Yeah. And taking those opportunities, which then leads to something like now. So it is like you're creating your own path in a way. And maybe even subconsciously sometimes, because I'm sure even the most confident of people, I feel like when they're taking those opportunities or showing up, there might be a part of them during some circumstances that are going to sit and say, is this really worth it? Why am I giving more of my time, more of my energy to this thing I can't, but like, I love doing it, and that's the driving force, but man, like, it'd be nice to get paid, or it'd be nice to get a thank you, it'd be nice to, like, because that's a natural thing.
Yes,
you
absolutely.
Everybody wants a return on investment of some sort, 100%. Whether it's small or whether it's big, but continuing regardless of getting that payment of any type. Yeah. That's the thing. That's the thing that matters.
It's the invisible work.
Yes, yeah.
The invisible work is the hardest because it's not the work that gets the praise. Doesn't get accolades. The benefit that you get is, first off, just knowing that you're making an impact. Sometimes it is stepping back. I mean, we recently had our Art for Franklinton fundraiser, and there was just a moment where I stood by myself and I just looked at all these guests experiencing the pieces of artwork, talking, and they don't know the hours upon hours, the late nights that go into this, the planning of this, but knowing what went into it and then seeing the direct result on people's faces. And eventually, it was a fundraiser, seeing it in what we were able to raise and then go back out into the community. It's that invisible work that made it possible that makes it so rewarding to me and, to so many people who are involved, on a volunteer level or working in nonprofits, because, people don't go into nonprofit work or volunteering for the money in any regard.
Right.
But yeah, no, it's, I really, again, appreciate you saying that. I've seen so many people really just dedicate those hours after work to the thing that they're passionate about. And yeah, it was when I was at 934, I was putting in hours comparable to my full-time job. And I realized that that paycheck for those 40 hours did not equal the satisfaction of these 40 hours that I'm putting in for no pay. And that's when I was just like, I have to make a change. And I was, again, very fortunate that this position came along at that exact time.
Yeah. And you were prepared to say yes.
Well, actually, I didn't the first time, because it was actually, they listed the position in, I think, May of, it's 2020. Or maybe it was right at the beginning of the pandemic.
Okay.
And within a short period, they were like, actually, we're going to close this. We're going to open it up back up later on. And internally, I was just like, oh, I just started a new job like 6 months ago. I don't want to be a job hopper, because I still have a very much old school mentality, that was ingrained from my mom and my stepdad and my dad, where you have to work at a place for X amount of years to make it really valuable on your resume. So I didn't want to jump from that job that I just started a few months ago, because that's not going to look good, not down the road, and especially not when I'm trying to get this new job. And I was like, if it just came along at a different time. So I didn't apply when it first was opened up, and then they closed it. I was like, oh man, I really hope that they open it back up. And it was then in November, later that year, that they opened it back up. And I was like, wow, I just hit my 1 year at this job. So I can say that I worked here 1 year.
Yeah.
And, I looked at, my financial situation, because obviously, I'm going into a very small arts organization. It would have to be something that I would be able to make sure I was okay financially, personally. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I think I can make this work. It's what I want to do. And yeah, it just worked out the best way possible.
Yeah.
And for a while I was like, wow, I don't think another opportunity is going to come around for that, or maybe after this first person gets it. And I mean, there's not a lot of positives that came out of the pandemic, but it held off that opportunity until it was right for me.
Right.
And the stars aligned, I guess.
Of course, yeah. If anything, it allowed you more time to prepare.
Yeah, absolutely.
to prepare to say yes at a later date.
I knew that I wanted to do it.
Yeah.
And then that's where I really identified, okay, how do I make that happen? So I looked at, the skills that I had built volunteering in the arts for a long time, and started to look for that possible next position. And yeah, luckily I didn't have to look too far, because this opened.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Now, something you have mentioned a couple times now is, I don't know if lessons is necessarily the right word, but the correct word I think is escaping me right now. But you've mentioned a lot of what you have carried over from things you've learned from parents.
Yeah.
You've mentioned mom, stepdad, dad. What was growing up like? Because it sounds like it was at least somewhat of a positive, influential, you've carried a lot of these learnings and lessons with you into, I mean, again, you've brought them up a handful of times already in decisions you've been making. Like, did you grow up in Columbus or in Ohio? Like, take me back. What was all that?
So I grew up in Mansfield. Okay. That's the widest, location, like the biggest location to compare to. I went to Lexington, which is a small village outside of Mansfield, so very, very small school. Fairly affluent for the school district, not me being one of them. So I would say that I was, and still am, most close with my mom. There was a period after my mom and my dad divorced where it was just us. And, I was very fortunate for shortly after for her to meet my then stepdad. And it was a loving household. It was a very creative household, especially from my mom. My mom has had a number of endeavors that she has explored. She's very much a yes, now how, where she has had a jewelry business, a handmade teddy bear business, leather burning, like crafts and stuff. So there was always like a really creative force that emanated from her. And she very much instilled in me a love for music. So that's where, there was always classic rock, there was always the Beatles, the Who, and then also jazz. Like there was always music playing in my household. And she got me involved in piano when I was 5. And I did that for about 5 years. And another major influence was my grandpa, who he never had an interest after probably the 1940s. A different interest. It was always like black and white, Laurel and Hardy, Abbott and Costello, big band, jazz, like Benny Goodman, Glenn Miller. So I had a really big jazz influence in my adolescence, and also appreciation for the classic comedies, I Love Lucy, and so when I turned 10, I wanted to play saxophone. And then that is kind of really where my love of music really took off. I was taking private lessons, all supported by my mom and my grandpa, taking me to private lessons, taking me to small jazz combos, summer jazz workshops. The first band I was in was a jazz combo that played a coffee shop once a month back in Mansfield. It was pretty rad at the time.
That's awesome.
So it was a very supportive household when it came to creative endeavors. Like I said, we didn't have a lot of money, but when I really demonstrated what I cared about and wanted to be involved in, my mom was 100% behind it, and like no question. And I still have that relationship with her to this day. She's one of my biggest influences, across the board, across the entire lifetime. I'm very, very grateful for that. But there were ebbs and flows, obviously. My parents, my mom and my dad, got divorced young, and then while I was in college, my mom and my then stepdad, they got divorced. So there were some tough times through all of that, and it just really made me appreciate her strength, and seeing what people go through, and that as much as you try to always hold it together, you need other people to support you, and I'm very lucky that I have had the chance to support her as she's gone through some things. She supported me, and we're very tight
Yeah.
I'm very appreciative of that relationship.
I love that. When it's awesome to have just that strong of a support system, that strong of an influence, because it's also not until a lot of the times, at least, when it becomes clearer, it's not until we're adults that we learn that our parents and the adults in our lives for so long, we're also just adults going through a bunch of stuff trying to figure it out. Because it's cliche at this point, but as you're growing up, you believe, the grown-ups have all the answers. They know everything. So there's no way anything's going wrong for them, Even when you see it going wrong, you're like, you don't process that really when you're younger that much. But it's like, yes, when you become an adult, you then can look back and be like, oh, now I know how I learned these things. I know what it was like, even, yes, you feel and experience what it's like going through those things, those turmoils when you're going through them. But sometimes it's not until later where you can process that, oh, this is how, parent or adult figure, whatever it is, really got us through that.
Absolutely. I think one of the aspects that it was tough growing up is with my dad. He is an alcoholic. He's in recovery. He's been in recovery since 1995, and I went with him to a number of meetings throughout my childhood, far more than people my age now have in their road to recovery. And I was like, why am I here? I'm listening to these stories, and he was trying to instill something in me that I didn't. This is when I'm 13 to 15, 16. He was trying to instill something in me that I didn't even realize I needed at that time. And then it wasn't until, my 20s into my 30s for me that I realized, I have a problem with alcohol. And I went sober, and I am currently, coming up on 4 years without a drink.
Nice. That's amazing.
Oh, thank you so much. And I took it for granted early on, and I'm just like, why am I here? This is a waste of my time. And now I'm just like, wow, I wish I would have been paying attention then, because my 20s and my early 30s, they, from a lot of the outside looking in, he's got it, put together. He's got a great job. He's got a house, yada, yada, yada. But there was so much that was unseen that was, very tough going through. I ruined some relationships. I let my health go. And, I wish, ultimately, I don't regret anything, because I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be sitting at this table at this very moment if it wasn't for the, where I tripped and I picked myself back up. But I wish, I would have just listened a little bit more, because there were a lot of lessons that you don't realize they were giving them to you when you were younger, until you're older, and you're like, wow, I had to learn this on my own. I wish somebody would have told me. Oh, they did.
Right. Yeah. And it honestly kind of circulates back in a different way to the invisible work that you were talking about earlier. Especially when, because everybody, it's the theme of this show, right? Everybody is doing something, going through things that nobody else gets to see or hear about behind closed doors. So just like all the things you just explained, it's like, it's this on the outside, but really this is what's going on the inside. There is invisible work having to be made that you're the only one that knows. You're the only one that sees it. You're the only one that knows, man, waking up today was kind of hard, or doing that thing yesterday was really difficult, or dealing with this thing. Just like you said, even, as an early teenager, joining your dad, for those meetings and all that sort of stuff. Like, nobody really, you know what I mean? Like people
Yeah.
close to you, sure, might, but like nobody really knows that that's something that somebody has experienced in that time. I'm sure when you're going to school, other than maybe some close friends that maybe you'd share that with, nobody's
Oh,
looking
no.
at you and they're like, oh, Johnny, I bet you did this last night.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, yeah, nobody knows that
It's
stuff.
definitely
Like,
not something I was bragging about.
Yeah, absolutely, of course. Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, you know, and there's that support system across the board, because it wasn't completely invisible. There was definitely a lot of close people to me who definitely saw what I was struggling with, and I'm, you know, luckily in a very loving relationship where my partner is incredibly supportive of my sobriety and, you know, incredibly accommodating, thoughtful. But it's those things where she saw the very lows, and you know, I just work to show her the highs as much as possible.
When it's just like you said, it's so vastly important to have, you know, even though, yes, we're talking about this invisible work, invisible progress, you know, all this sort of stuff of working around challenges, but again, another running theme that we've been talking about this whole time are support systems.
Yes.
And it's so important to have those things in place, whether it's friendships, relationship, you know, whatever it may be. But again, even going back to, you know, growing up and being able to luckily, you know, have those support systems that may have been teaching you lessons that you weren't aware of at the time, but that technically built a foundation that you were able to build upon later on.
Yes.
When you had to individually make difficult decisions. Like, I think about that all the time. Like, because growing up, like, I had a split family. So, you know, my parents were never together. I had step parents, and unfortunately for the first 12, well, not first 12 years, but I was like 2 or 3. At that point in time, my dad got me a stepmom who, you know, unfortunately at that point in time, she was not ready to be a parent.
Okay.
She was not equipped to be a parent. So until I was about 12 or 13, I dealt with just like terrible, just like mental abuse constantly,
God.
you know, to where I was just terrified to go to my dad's because of this woman, right? Mm-hmm. And at the same time, you know, my mom on the opposite side is trying to deal with all this of like, okay, there's this new person in his life, and he is telling me all these terrible things. What, you know, so it's like I look back at situations like that, I'm like, how did you, you know, keep it together? How did you help work through that? And I know if I sat and really thought about it, you know, there's tons that all of those situations taught me. There's tons of stuff that, while I might not be able to click it off the top of my brain right now and recite it, I'm sure there are so many things that my mom and other family members who were aware of what was going on, there's tons of things that they instilled in me trying to help me actively deal with it that now probably are big foundational pillars as to why I'm not completely insane all the time. You know what I mean? It's like, oh man, absolutely. I had to deal with this growing up, and now I'm like this. I'm gonna treat people like crap because I was treated like crap. You know, it's the classic phrase like hurt people, right?
Yes.
And it's somewhere in that process that we have to figure out how to deal with those things. And so again, going back to I think maybe the term luck is maybe a usable term here of like lucky to have those foundational pillars, be able to put those things in place and hopefully keep you on some sort of a track. Because not to get all like deep and existential here, but like I think about that so often where I'm like, man, you know, like by no means did I grow up in the worst of ways. By no means, you know, there are plenty of situations that other people have experienced that are worse than mine, right? But for my particular case, there's a lot of growing up that was not fun due to those things, right? Yeah. And I think about that all the time where I'm like, how am I not just, and I don't even know how to word this because I kind of want to tiptoe around it because I don't know, but like, how am I not just a really shitty person? You know what I mean? Like, why am I not angry at the world for what I dealt with? Because it did suck. Yeah. You know, was it maybe the worst it could have been? Sure, no, but it was still bad. And so I always try to like think, I'm like, well, how was my brain or my emotions or whatever, like how, like, and I don't have the answers for this, but like I think about that stuff all the time. I'm like, how am I wired the way that I'm wired?
Yeah.
That didn't just completely destruct me.
Oh, no,
Completely destroy me,
I completely agree and understand. For better or worse, the people closest to us are the examples that they're setting the examples, both positive and negative.
Yeah.
I mean, I would love to say everything that my mom and my dad did and my now ex-stepdad did were all positive examples, but no, there were a lot of negative examples that I identified, and I was like, well, I'm not going to do that.
Right.
I mean, the separation between my mom and my now ex-stepdad was incredibly toxic, and it lasted a very long time and was incredibly rough on me and my younger brother, who unfortunately my younger brother was still in the house while it was happening. It was wild because I had the stepdad that I had growing up was a completely different person than the person he became. And I took that positive example of who he was for a large portion of my upbringing, and I took that into my life today. So my partner has a 7-year-old son who she is very close with his father and his father's wife. And I came into this, first off, not having any experience being this role model to a young child, but I did have a stepdad, and I knew at his very best that was the type of stepdad that I wanted to be. Coming into this like role model role. I'm not his stepdad yet, but it was something that I knew the value of a stepdad. Mm-hmm. And it was a very positive example. But also when my ex-stepdad turned to the person that he was, that provided a really good example of who I never want to become.
Right.
And now, we have a very unique family situation with my partner and her son. I'm very close with his father and his wife, and it's the saying, it takes a village. Mm-hmm. It's a very unique thing, but it works for us, and I love having that ability to, watch this incredibly creative, young, funny kid grow up and learn things, and I just take what I experienced and now try to do that and better.
Yeah, which is an amazing thing to get to do.
Yeah.
Is to take the good that you learned from either the good or the bad, mm-hmm. and now be able to put that into a different situation. And again, same thing in my case, like of taking from those situations that I had growing up. Luckily I had an awesome stepdad from the time I was like 2 or 3, right?
Yeah.
So I had that good example to go off of, and I just unfortunately at that point in time had the stepmom example, right? But like that's sort of the thing, is like I almost feel like growing up I lived this 50-50 life where 50% was this example, 50% was that example, and in a way I feel like it almost helped me balance things out.
Yeah.
Because I saw examples of enough good and bad, a lot of kind of what you're saying, and I think like the true power is being able to take from both of those things. Mm-hmm. And it's been said a billion times, it's super cliche, but you can only learn from failures.
Yeah.
And failures of any point, of any kind. And it's weird verbiage to say like, yes, a family thing growing up was a failure, like not really a failure, but it's a negative situation.
Yeah.
That we can be able to or choose to learn from. And then, again, just like so much of what we've been talking about, whether it's arts and creative or business or marketing or like, I mean, you did the same thing through your jobs, you know, and I know I'm like linking a lot of things together here, but like so much of what you just explained when we were talking about the family stuff, you've taken the bits and pieces that you've learned along the way, and now you're able to put them into your current situation to hopefully make that the best that it can be. You said you did the same thing in the jobs, right? You picked up something from marketing, you picked up something from this, something from that, and then led you to the situation that...
It's something that you have to... It doesn't always come easy, and it didn't come easy to me. And you just have to be open. You have to have your mind, your heart open to identifying lessons. You know, I spoke to my sobriety. This isn't the first time I tried it. I did it for a little under 2 years before. And then I was like, oh, I got a handle on this. You know, I can drink again. And what I didn't realize was I just removed what I thought, well, I removed the problem. Well, I removed what I thought was the answer to the problem. I didn't address the problem.
Yeah, okay.
So I was what would refer to as a dry drunk. So I took away the alcohol, but I didn't address any of the things with my mental health or what I was dealing with in my relationships or, you know, any of those things. I just removed what I, you know, used to kind of relieve those issues. And then when I jumped back in, I hadn't made any progress at all. And it was one of those things where I'm like, oh, maybe I have to learn and I have to change things about myself, or take what take those positives, incorporate them into this, and now, you know, adjust it accordingly. Yeah. No, it just, as you grow, and I think this comes with age, it comes with experience, but there's a lesson in everything that you do. Not everything's going to be monumental. Some things are, you know, going to be incredibly subtle. Some things are going to knock you over the head because, yeah, you should have known this. You should have seen it coming. But you have to have your mind and your heart open to understanding that the change is going to build you into a better person, and that you're not. Nobody is perfect, and that failure does not mean that you are any less valuable as a person. It's what you do with that. And it's when you take those lessons and you build upon them and you keep going on.
Well, it's like I've talked about this on this show many times of like, it's just like a video game, right?
Yeah.
Every new level you go to, there's going to be new challenges that you might not be equipped for. You might fail a couple times at trying to beat it, right?
Yeah.
Then eventually you're going to, and then guess what happens? You carry new powers, new understandings, new techniques into the next level you go to. But guess what? Just because you have new powers and strengths from the last lesson you learned doesn't mean actually that next level is going to be any easier.
Yes.
Because with that new level comes new challenges, a new weight of those challenges that luckily you've got a little more than you did before, right? You've got a little bit more to take on that challenge with, but you're still going to have to learn something else, something new. And like for the longest time, especially once I got into like adult years, and slowly uncovering who I really was or who I wanted to be, not necessarily what I wanted to be, but who I wanted to be, right?
There's a big difference.
There is. And I think
not
a lot
everybody
of people
understands that.
No. And I can't remember who it was. It was actually somebody, oddly enough, at the first Franklinton Friday I went to. I'm just connecting about a billion things right now. I met them through Larry Robertson.
Oh, yeah.
And we were chatting, and they asked, like, who are you? And they actually clarified their question. They're like, I know that might be kind of weird to ask, but I ask who you are, not what you do, because we are not what we do.
Yes.
And that is exactly kind of what we were just talking about. It's like there's always these labels of like, oh, I am this, I am that, blah, blah, blah. But this is who I am, right? And so it takes a lot of uncovering, and it's not instant. It's not just like so many of the challenges that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh yeah, dude, one day I started thinking positively and all the problems went away.
Absolutely,
yeah. It takes time. It takes maybe a few failed attempts also, because I feel like, a lot of people go through this, but like going into young adulthood, like I kind of at first consistently thought I knew who I was.
Oh, absolutely.
You get that kind of confidence of like,
yeah.
oh, I learned this new thing and this is who I am and this is, what I do and blah, blah, blah. And then you're like, oh, wait, no. A year just went by and I get that I'm just explaining growing up. But I think it's very easy to not actually identify that that's what growing up is at all. I think I think it's easy to get caught in a cycle of like things go wrong, you get through it, you move on. Things go wrong, you get through it, you move on, without learning the lessons from those things, gaining those new strengths, gaining those new powers and understandings to carry into the next thing. So that way because it's inevitable, when a new challenge pops up, you remember, oh yeah, I've got this in my tool belt to kind of get a handle on this.
Yep.
Am I going to solve it instantly? Maybe not. Maybe I will. I don't know. But I'm better equipped for that challenge. I'm better equipped to say yes to that opportunity, right?
Yeah.
And so I've gone through like so many phases where so often I was like, oh yeah, I know who I am. This is awesome. And then I'm like, oh wait, no, I don't. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
It's like I can look back at so many different phases of myself. But what I've been able to now uncover is I can actually start to identify the common thread through all of those identities of mine.
Absolutely.
Yes. Of like, oh, even when I was like even when I was a dumb young teenager or a dumb early 20s, whatever, even though I did like these silly things and whatever it may be, at the core, there was still this poking through. Yeah. I still did this at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
And like being able to identify those things, just like all the lessons, just like all the things we're talking about with this adult hindsight we have.
Yeah.
Right? But that's also never going to change. I know that probably 5 years from now, I might watch this podcast and be like, what was I saying? I thought I had it figured out, right?
Yeah.
But it's being able to kind of gain that clarity on like, oh no, like I feel like there's true power and I feel like you said or alluded to something like this earlier, like there's power in that vulnerability of knowing you're always going to be changing.
Yeah.
Because I think that also makes you susceptible to those lessons that can come with it.
Yes.
Because if you're just stuck, you have the blinders up and you're stuck of like, nope, this is what I do, this is who I am. You're not going to embrace change. And I'm not saying it should be easy. Change is difficult. Change can be difficult. Most of the time, it probably should be, realistically, right?
Because there's a reason that you're changing.
Exactly.
And that hurdle to make those changes, it's why you are changing. I mean,
And I feel like also there's something to be said that like that challenge has popped up for a reason. To go back to the video game thing, that challenge has popped up because you're now further into the level than maybe what you thought you were, right?
Yeah.
We've gotten further into the level, and now this new thing has popped up that wasn't back there. That's because you're further now.
Yeah.
There's something new that's going to pop up. And I just think there's so much value in being able to, at some point in your journey, be able to identify those things and be able to maybe try and slow yourself down sometimes and look at how you've grown and maybe even try to re-identify what is in my figurative tool belt that allows me to take on these upcoming challenges. I'm not great at that, but I've started to try and practice that.
Yeah.
It's almost in a way like practicing gratitude, of, being thankful for what you have, where you've been, what you've went through, all that sort of stuff. Almost looking at that like figurative tool belt that I keep mentioning is like, okay, when a problem pops up, sure, we can be angry at it, we can be upset, we can be like, I don't want to deal with this issue. But if we do slow down a little bit, take a little bit of a step back, and I'm not saying you go on a 4-week vacation to find yourself, right? Just take a moment and sit and say, okay, what do I have with me already that allows me to take this challenge on, or allows me to maybe make a more conscious decision rather than letting my autopilot fly things now. Because it's super easy. And I say this because I've done this and I still catch myself doing this. It's easy to get in autopilot.
Yeah.
When it comes to emotions or decisions or just, oh, that thing didn't work. Yeah, I guess, whatever. I mean, who cares? You know, this podcast is a great example. There's so many times where I'm like, why don't my episodes get 10,000 listens every episode? Why not? Man, it was such a good conversation. Nobody cares about it. Why is it not getting 10,000 views on Instagram? You know, why am I not getting that? And I can sit and I can say that and get caught up in that, right? But then all it takes is one message from someone who says, man, that episode with so-and-so that I just listened to, when you guys talked about this thing, it made me realize that I wasn't the only one. It made me understand, gain a new understanding, learn something, or just feel something and connect with that person. Like, so thanks for making that episode, right?
It's reminding yourself of what value are you taking out of this.
Yeah.
It's not always financial. It's not always reach. I mean, as cliche as it is, you know, the saying, if I can just affect one person, or if I can touch one person. Well, I mean, it's cliche because it's actually very true. When you are able to really make that connection, that emotional, impact on somebody and their life, that is where you draw that value. And sometimes it's hard, especially in the, when you are working in a very autonomous space, especially as a creative or freelancer. It's hard to get out of that because you're the only driving force. You have to be not only the content creator, but you have to be the accountant. You have to be, the marketing lead. You have to be all these other things. And you're in that because you don't go into it to do the financial aspects of it. You do it because of your passions, of what you want to create, how you want to impact people. And those other things come along with being a business owner or a freelancer. And it's really hard to step back and be like, no, that is why I do this.
Mm-hmm. That's that through line sort of thing. That's understanding
absolutely.
What, not in a broad scope, world-changing view purpose, but just that tiny thread of purpose, identifying, why do I do this? Or why do I want to do this? What is the thing, like that, even going back to some of what we were talking about way earlier in the episode, like that's why I justify doing so many different creative outlets, because I know why in my core I want to do them. And that doesn't mean I won't get bored with some of them sometimes, and some of them might just be a phase that I'll move out of. But I'm going to say yes to myself and let myself experience that.
Absolutely.
Whether it's good or bad, I'm going to learn something from it. Right now, I'm just bawling everything we've already said up into all these like big full circle moments. But like, it's all so true, though.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that and rehashing so much of what we've already said, because it's like, I have learned the value in being transparent with yourself. Learning when you feel good and why, learning when you feel bad and why, and then dictating what you do. Then dictating like, well, how should I feel, or how do I want to feel? What's this thing I need to get through? Or, how do I make this thing better? Even if it's fine, you know what I mean? How do I take this thing that's good and make it better if I want it to be better?
Yes.
Like, having those conversations with yourself, and it doesn't always have to be in the creative field. Like, I'm sure the majority of people that are listening to a podcast like this probably do, dabble in that world somewhat. So we're probably preaching to the choir, but like, this goes for anything.
It really does.
I have this conversation with, friends, many friends, over the years. And again, I don't have all the answers. I just have my perspective that I hope could shed some light for somebody and help them connect the dots, right? But like, I've had this conversation with many people over the years where they're like, oh, I'm in a day job that I hate, or I'm in the situation that I hate and I don't know how to get out. And it's like, I don't have the answer for you, but I am going to share everything I know, because then what that's going to do is hopefully help you shed the light on the answer that you already have. You know, the Wizard of Oz thing, right? It's in you. It's already in you. And sometimes it takes a soundboard of somebody else, not to tell you what to do, but just to help you shed light on who you are, find that core purpose. Because like, it's so easy to, again, get caught up in that autopilot mode. I hate this job, it sucks, blah, blah, blah. There's just no way out. Well, there is, but me telling you that there is, and me trying to be hype man of, bro, you can go freelance, man, you can do it. That doesn't help, Even though sometimes, yeah, sure, somebody needs hyped up sometimes,
Yeah.
but let's hype up with purpose and intention of like, okay, well, what is it that you dislike or like about that job? What can you take from that? And then maybe, okay, look ahead. What's a plan? What's an exit plan?
Absolutely.
What's something you can do? Because again, you did that earlier. You took certain aspects from those different jobs and positions you were in. You collected them and you moved on.
You can't complain about your situation if you're not willing to do the work to change the situation. I see it so much. I see it with family members, with friends, where, some of my family members are saying, oh, I'm too old to change careers. Well, has somebody said that to you? No, I don't think anybody has said that to you. You've said that to yourself. And it's just like self-defeating. And you're not taking those steps. You're not trying. If you have tried 100 times and it's not worked out, try that 101st.
Yeah.
Because
Yep.
I mean, you can't complain about your situation if you aren't willing to do the work, the actual steps to change it.
Right. And it's like sometimes, like, just to keep going with the silly video game analogies, like sometimes, most of the time actually, we're our own final boss.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
And we are there the entire time. It's not just that final level, because there really isn't a final level.
Mm-hmm.
We're always our biggest challenge.
Absolutely.
And so much of it is a mental game. That's why there's a cliche quote around every corner.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And on every podcast, just like this one. That's why stuff is filled with that stuff, because just like you said earlier, it's cliche because it's true. It's overused and oversaid because it's true. And whether it is kind of an annoying hype person who's saying it makes it hard to listen to, because I will fully admit there's a lot of those people on the internet that I don't like when they say that stuff, because I'm like, God, the way you're saying it. But again, what can you take from it?
Mm-hmm.
And again, all those things are cliche because they're true, because it all starts up here.
Absolutely.
It all starts up here. And even when you identify that, again, it doesn't mean that the problems go away. Because I can sit and I can be a cool dude with the podcast, sitting and saying all this stuff right now. But guess what? Tonight, when I'm laying in bed awake thinking about my life, I'm going to not know what to do.
Yeah.
So I can sit here right now on a podcast and be like, this is everything I've learned, and this is what I hope somebody else learns who's listening to this. Aren't I so smart? Okay, great. Cool. Even though I have that equipped in me, it doesn't mean that it's always going to flip on when I need it.
100%.
There's going to be some of that invisible work needed to be done to flip that switch, to turn that machine on, to, you know what I mean, to start to put it to use.
Yeah.
And it's a never-ending cycle. It's never going to end. And again, the phases thing of like, I look back at different versions of myself. Now I can identify the through line. I can identify that common thread through everything and understand who I am at my core. So I understand better why I make the decisions I do, why I like to do the things that I do. I might not understand it completely, and I probably never will, because that answer I'm searching for is also going to be ever-changing.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
I completely agree, and I think that the through line becomes only more apparent. It becomes bigger in your life the longer that you go, the older that you are, the more experience that you have, because you have taken those moments to identify that, why am I in this moment? Why am I in this situation? How can I change it? And it becomes bigger and bigger, because your through line is what you value. It is what you care about. And, it doesn't have to be your career or your, creative endeavor. It can be just your family, your friends. I mean, that's something that I remember we talked about in the last time we chatted, is just giving the same effort that you do with your career or what you're getting involved in, and putting that same type of effort into your relationships, whether it's family, whether it's friends, and identifying, am I working on those the same way I'm working on my job? When jobs come and go, careers come and go, but that support system, those relationships, the things that you value, are those through line. throughout your entire life.
So, shifting gears a little bit.
Yeah.
Having looked back at all the cool one-liner things that we just spewed for the last however long it's been, and sitting here as this version of you now.
Yeah.
Looking forward, how can I ask this? What's like the next version of you that you hope to become? Because now you're in this position, you're executive director, and things, I want to say, hey, you're that forever, but things can change. Things can change at any point in time, right? But you're still going to do great work while you're doing it, whether it is forever, whether it is for whatever amount of time. So at your core, what are things that you want to get involved with more, whether that's with Franklinton or just as an individual, because you've had a vast array of interest over the years, and again, you've been through the ups and downs. There's always more to come, right?
Yep,
but
absolutely.
Now you're better equipped to make those decisions. Looking forward, what are the next versions of you that maybe you almost hope are there, or things that you're working on to get there?
That's a really great question, and one that is constantly changing and never ending. I think the biggest thing that I want to see with my work is making a larger, wider impact. Now that can mean more students are involved in these programs like the mural mentorship, or it means more grant opportunities, more paid jobs. I want to try to scale it up so that more people are being positively benefited from my efforts, whether it is right now and in the future in the Franklinton Arts District, or it's in Columbus with an organization that's here, or maybe an organization that isn't created yet. I want to make an impact on this city, both a personal impact on those who live here, but also on the landscape. A big thing that I'm very passionate about is public art. And I think that Columbus has a tremendous amount of muralists and sculptors and artists who have had some opportunity to showcase, but I don't think Columbus has embraced public art the way other cities have. If you've gone to Cincinnati and walked around, they have truly embraced public art in a way that is immersive, and it moves people around the city and creates a sense of pride in individual neighborhoods and the city as a whole. And the landscape has changed over the years in Cincinnati. And that's what I would love to see Columbus transition into. And I would love to be a part of that. With our mural mentorship, and this is getting ahead and it's like dreaming big, but I want to grow it to where these students are coming in their freshman year having no real understanding of what their capabilities are of doing a mural, and essentially have them participate through their entire high school career. And they'll work on a group mural the first year. The second year, the group's going to get smaller, and there's going to be more groups, more murals. And by the time they get to their fourth year in this program, they're doing their own mural and placing that into their city, into their neighborhood. Now, I've done the math before. I can't remember the numbers. But if we just had one of our camps, because there's 4 camps, we have one in Hilltop, Franklinton Arts District, King Lincoln Bronzeville, and then on the south side. But if just one of those camps had that, we're talking about 40 plus murals being added to the landscape of the city every single year. And that's just for one camp. So it's a program that honestly has, it's providing skills, because it's focusing on the public art, but it also has technology components. We do augmented reality, design on tablets. It's building kind of a STEAM approach to it. It's building that beautification aspect. It's that neighborhood making aspect. It's really got a lot of benefits to it. And, in the end, it's creating a city that we are visually proud of and a part of, because these students are going to point to their family and say, I put that there. I mean, how much better does that get? Mm-hmm. So I think it's the same efforts, but on a bigger scale.
Yeah.
And that's where, I hope to be in a couple of years. I hope, FAD, Franklinton Arts District, is there with me. And then beyond that, we'll see. It's never ending.
So another thing that we've talked about is so much of, equipping ourselves to be able to look towards the future and be able to take on those challenges and say the yeses and all those sort of things. Bit of a left field question.
Okay.
But based off of that, looking back at your journey,
mm-hmm.
whether it comes from a negative or a positive place, what would you say is the best thing that you've learned? What is the best lesson you've learned in your journey?
My journey to get to this place.
As a human.
As a human. Oh my gosh.
In general.
Oh, that is a big question. Ooh.
I throw some heavy hitters out there.
Yeah,
when we get to the end of the episode.
What's the best lesson that I've learned? Man, I think that this is kind of a summary of both, the personal, spiritual journey and spiritual growth that we've talked about. This is, along the lines of, the career aspects is just never being afraid to change. I think that's it, because you would look at Johnny 5 years ago and be like, that's a different guy. 5 years before that, that's a different guy. 5 years from now, you'll be like, that's a different guy. And I hope that, 5 years from now, I am, a better version, the best so far version of myself, because I was not afraid to change. If I wouldn't have had that mentality, that ability, I would still be working for, the marketing company. It was tobacco. My client was tobacco. I would still be doing that, but I knew that I needed to change. If it wasn't for that, I would still be working with some institutions who some were supportive, some were not, but I wouldn't be here. Same thing with my sobriety. If I didn't identify and, not be afraid to change, I would still be following a path that was destroying both me internally and all my external relationships. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the biggest lesson that can be really utilized in every aspect of your life, is just don't be afraid to change.
I love that. Man, dude, I cannot thank you enough for just sharing everything that you've shared in this conversation. Like, I seriously appreciate it.
Hey, this was wonderful. As me and you continue to grow our friendship, I am an open book. And, if any of the listeners have any questions or, want to dive into any of these topics further, you can reach out to me and I'll get coffee with you. We'll sit down, we'll chat. I'm never ashamed. Well, I don't regret anything from my past, because it has led me to where I am, and I openly talk about anything, because I'm very proud of the person that I've been able to become, and I hope that I will continue to change again to become the better version. And if I'm able to help anyone else do that, That's what I'm here for.
Well, dude, I have one final question for you before we go home.
Yeah.
I end this podcast, every single episode, with the exact same question. And I cannot wait to see how you answer this.
Okay.
I kind of feel like we've said so many things that could be your answer, so even if you rehash, it's fine. But right now, I'd like for you to pretend that everyone in the world can hear you speak right now. Everybody, everywhere. It doesn't matter. Throw logic out the window.
Okay.
They can hear us. They can understand us. They know what we're saying. You have a live mic attached to everyone in the world. What is it that you would want them to hear?
Show up for those who you care about. Whether they are your partners, your family members, the community that you're a part of, show up for them. Do the work that they deserve and that is meaningful to you.
I love it, man. Dude, I cannot thank you enough. Is there anything that you feel like we haven't covered, that you feel like you're like, dude, we gotta say something about this? Anything left on the table here?
No, I think we covered most of it. For those who have not been or experienced the Franklinton Arts District, come down the second Friday of every month. It's Franklinton Fridays. From 6 to 10, all the galleries, maker spaces, restaurants, bars, everything is open. And you can really explore and see what the Arts District has to offer. It's that introduction, and see if there's something for you.
How would you tell somebody maybe who's listening or watching that maybe wants to start volunteering in some of these things? Like, how would you, that might open a floodgate of making this podcast longer, but like, is there a simple answer of like, hey, maybe here's how to get started?
For us, you can go to franklintonartsdistrict.com. For anyone, go on their website, DM the Instagram pages for the organizations. There's so much in this city and in this the creative community and the neighborhood of Franklinton, everywhere. And they're always looking for volunteers. And most of the time, they are just as excited to hear from anyone. So it really doesn't matter like how you reach out to them. Just share why you're wanting to volunteer and get involved. But I'd love to see you in the Franklinton Arts District. So you can personally email me if you're interested in volunteering in Franklinton at johnny@franklintonartsdistrict.com. I just put my email out there.
There it is. There it is. I hope somebody hits you up.
Yeah.
That'd be cool. That'd be cool if they were like, yeah, listen to the podcast. And now no, that's awesome. And you answered my next question is I was like, hey, if anybody wants to get a hold of you directly, where can they find you? But yeah, I mean, you just threw your email out there.
Yep.
That's perfect. That is perfect. Johnny, I've said it 1,000 times already, but once again, dude, thank you so much for doing the show. I appreciate you sitting down for however long it's been at this point, talking about all the things that we talked about. This was such a fun conversation.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much. And I love that the reason we're here just started from a DM.
Yep.
Straight up just started from a DM. So, dude, thank you so much, man. This is a blast.
Thank you, man.
Okay, so another big thank you to Johnny for being on the show and having just such an awesome conversation with me. Such a good dude, doing some really cool things here in Franklinton. We touched on it a bit there at the end, but I'm just going to add to it. For real, if you're an artist, a creative, a maker, or just, doer of any kind and want to chat with somebody about it, for some really great insight on how you can get more involved with the Franklinton Arts District or the community in general, or honestly just like any arts community, I feel like Johnny's going to have some really solid thoughts and advice for you. So you can find him, reach out to him. The reminder for that, where you can find him, you can follow him at Franklinton Arts District on social, or for more info in general, you can hop over to franklintonartsdistrict.com. Also, if you want to keep up with this show around social, find and follow us at WYDH Pod. If you want to follow me, I'm at Who's Ross Tyson. More importantly, though, please please hit the follow or subscribe buttons wherever you're listening. It would be extra sweet if you tossed up a rating and a review for the show while you're there as well. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Ross Tyson. That's where you can find every episode in video form over there. So follow, subscribe, rate, review, share it, tell somebody about it, whatever you can do to help spread the word of this show and get these stories heard by more ears in whatever form, however you want to do it. It helps a whole lot more, honestly, a whole lot more than what you may know. So one last reminder before we go to check out this week's sponsors, Makers Social, the DIY craft bar located in the Franklinton Arts District. Visit makerscolumbus.com and enter the code WYDH in the notes of your checkout for $10 off your reservation. And of course, also PromoWest Productions and all the shows they've got coming through Columbus. For more info on all of those, visit promowestlive.com. But that'll do it for this episode, guys. Support if you can, support if you want. But even if you don't, I thank you so very much for listening. If you're on YouTube, thanks for looking. And I hope you stick around for more because, as always, I'll be back next episode with a brand new guest that you may or may not know of, sharing their story that you for sure never heard.